I guess, almost aversion to eating loads of animal products for me started when I was a child. I had like really, really shit skin, like eczema and all that kind of thing, like dry, crusty. It wasn't
Mm.
good. And yeah, the doctors would always say it was dairy that caused it. So like as a child, I had no idea how anything worked in that front. So we switched from cow's milk, pasteurized cow's milk, but still better than what we switched to soy. And I don't
Mm.
really think you could find a worse thing for a growing male to consume on a daily basis than soy. I think that would be like kryptonite, basically, to male development. Um, and yeah, over time, because we had here in the UK the mad cow disease scare.
Hmm.
This was back in, I think it started kind of back in like 2001, 2000. Might be a bit sketchy on that. But because of that, we didn't really eat any red meat at all, like for years. We still had like a bit of chicken and pork and stuff like that, but yeah, like zero red meat. And so on top of that, so now I thought that not only did dairy wreck my skin, but now I was thinking red meat's like the devil or whatever, like diseased and all that. So yeah, as I was like a teenager, and you start questioning things. We were always in school like being shown all these like slaughterhouse videos, namely of chickens for some reason. And yeah, I don't know, maybe because my estrogen levels were so high from soy or something, I found it like properly upsetting, I guess. Like not crying or anything like, ridiculous like that, but I was properly horrified. Like, oh, how awful. Um, and yeah, so like, by the time I was like 16, 17, I was barely eating any meat at all. But I wasn't really eating much fruit or veg either. It was kind of a grain and sweets diet. So it wasn't really a diet at all. It was kind of like a steady self-destruction, I guess. But yeah, you don't really think of that type of thing when you're younger. At least I didn't. But yeah, I went from because when I was really young, so like let's say 6 or 7, I was always very high up, like academically at that level. Like I was considered quite promising as a student. By the time I was like 15, I was dumb as shit, basically. Bad memory, zero attention span, bad mood swings as well, like behavior in class. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't focus properly. Um, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't really. Again, I just kind of didn't put any thought into it. No one I knew did. And there was a lot of other people kind of similar who then like you realize over time when you speak and stuff that they're also eating like dreadfully and like mostly vegetable stuff and so on. But anyway, yeah, by the time I was like I say 17, it goes without saying I wasn't exactly a cool kid, and I was pretty desperate to have a girlfriend and all that kind of thing, I guess. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was. That's the thing. I mean, I was so. I guess the word is unmanly. I don't know if that's a dated phrase these days, but like even just in mannerisms, I'd notice them. Like especially when I think back on it now. But even then, a lot of hands, a lot of weird like limp hand gestures and stuff. And
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. It's just between that and like looking so thin, it was like I hadn't really developed at the usual rate. Like I came from a family, like on my mum's side, most of the guys had really thick facial hair and stuff. I don't know, by that age, like 16, 17, they'd have beards and all that. Um, but I didn't. I mean, this like patchy mess here, this is me at like, almost 27. And it's the first time it's ever shown up in a capacity where it's not worrying. Um, but anyway, yeah, so like the one girl I was with at the time was a vegetarian, right? She had like an eating disorder at one point, and that's what I noticed was a lot of people at that point they use vegetarianism as an excuse to try and eat less, like when they're on these like when they're being treated for eating disorders and stuff. But she told me it was an ethical thing, and not even an animal treatment ethical thing. Like I'd always heard of that, but cows farting destroys the sky thing, like methane. And even then, I thought that was kind of silly, like, 'cause I assume cows have been farting since however long they existed, you know. But nonetheless, to try and be impressive, it's a terrible way to try and be impressive. But I went full vegan for the first time. That's full plant-based, and my diet mostly consisted of green vegetables, bananas, and peanut butter. I always had this uncontrollable peanut butter craving. And I knew it was just, I mean, now I know it's probably because of fats. Like, I had no fat in my diet. That's the one thing my body knew had fat. But peanut butter is crap fats, right? Like, it's not really the type of thing that'll do good for your skin or your hair or whatever else. But yeah, and I felt like shit, like even more than already. I had spots everywhere, like breaking out non-stop. And I never put it together that it could be because I was eating dreadfully. I just thought, oh, you know, spots is a fact of life, especially when you're going through puberty. Everyone gets, zits everywhere. But yeah, about 3 months in though, I felt I had like zero energy. I was even skinnier, like my bones were so thin for my age. I think is what was scariest because muscles you can kind of correct over time, but once you got skinny wrists and skinny ankles and you're hitting 18, you're kind of permanently looking at being a bit damaged, I guess. Like your body hasn't really done the amount of growth you were probably hoping it would. So yeah, I started eating meat again, but the meat I ate was bad, like badly processed, overcooked, nothing. There's nothing hugely nutritious. It's still better than what I was eating when I was vegan. But I always felt really guilty, like really almost like ashamed, like I was committing like a sin or something.
And why did you stop being vegan then for the first time? Because you just felt weak?
Yeah, I was just out of control meat cravings, basically. I think all the time I was just craving chicken breast because, again, like that was like the main thing my body knew meat-wise. And
Mm.
so I was like buying them by the stack. I think because I've always been like a city guy. Like I've never lived in the country or in nature or anything. And being so removed from any kind of natural human living, a lot of how I'm meant to live just kind of went over my head. And instead of thinking it was natural, I thought everything was barbaric, you know. So even when I broke up with this girl, I was still kind of in that vein of thinking. Um, and yeah, I mean, like the amount of times then where I would try and basically go vegan again, and then be broken down by cravings, and then say it was because I had no self-discipline. I think was my explanation. No self-control. It was just ridiculous. I think back, I was basically whipping myself like one of those monks over what a natural thing the body needed, like against, you know, what my organs and stuff were saying, no, you need to eat this, enough of that crap you just put in me, like I need more.
I
Um,
have one question. Would you say that men nowadays would behave quite different if they wouldn't eat such plant-based diets and all of the stuff that we eat nowadays? Like, would
oh,
you say that it changed the potential of man, basically?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's been certain stories in history of peoples whose DNA was basically changed from the way they lived, and it impacted like the next generation and the next generation. So you have some ethnic groups who often have turned out like freakishly strong people in recent generations because they had people that survived like all kinds of hardship in yesteryear or yestercentury. Whereas now, especially here in the West, right, I can't really speak for continents I haven't been to or live in, but here in the West, I would say each generation man becomes like more of a wimp, basically, like more soft. And there'll be exceptions. There's still like, you know, tough guys out there and all that kind of thing. But I would say because each time a guy who's eating less well and has a lower testosterone lifestyle, which isn't just for food, it's like, you know, it's being worked to death every day. You know, living in flats, like I live in a flat at the moment, I can barely think half the time with how noisy it is and stuff.
Mm.
Um, and then they're passing that on to the next generation. So the next generation is raised by, you know, a weaker guy, slightly weaker hormones, weaker food, weaker indoctrinating as well, I guess, like weaker mental development because you're taught differently. And then when that guy then grows up and breeds, it's the same thing. So by the time you get to sort of now, compared to 100 years ago, it's laughable. Like, if I get into a fight with a guy from 100 years ago, on average, chances are my face will get rearranged, you know, like, it would be horrendous. Yeah, it's like, it's de-evolution, I guess, you know.
Right. Well, also, what about the academic performance, like you mentioned? Do you think that people would also generally be more clever?
In general, I mean, with less fat, especially less saturated fat, which is what, you know, the brain is, like, composed of, people are just going to become dumber regardless. Like, you know, they always say, like, with the ketogenic diet, a lot of people say it's the ultimate, like, brain diet, right? And, you know, if you have that, your intellect will be as sharp as it can be. But when everyone's sitting around eating sugar all day, and then they're sitting around for 3 hours listening to boring bullshit, yeah, I mean, nothing's going to register at all. We all did that. I mean, a lot of people did that because of food pyramids. You know, they say, like, if you have, like, a can of food, the recommendations, it'll be like your RDA, how much you should eat of this nutrient a day. And carbohydrates will be like 300 grams. And protein, it'll be 50. And fat, it'll be 50. Like, it's this disproportionate thing. You're like, oh, no, well, I don't want heart disease, so I better keep the fat low. And I don't want kidney disease, so I better keep the protein low. Carbs, you know, safe. That's good. The carbs are shit. Like, they've torpedoed your brain, your hormones. What I never realized, what I know now, these food pyramids and stuff, they're not created by dietitians and, like, genius health nuts. They're created by corporations and by agriculture. They're essentially funded to sell what makes money. And, you know, just lost track of what I was saying. Selling grain in surplus to people is cheap and easy and profitable. And, you know, that's great if you're one of the evil geniuses behind that industry. But for everyone else who's being duped, that's beyond terrible. You know, the only animal I think that can handle eating grains is birds. Birds, sorry. And, you know, they were always dehydrated. That's one of the few animals where you see them always trying to drink water and stuff. And it's because they're dried out. But around that time, because there was all these athletes, especially in American football and stuff, that were claiming they were vegan, that veganism was the cure, you know, the way to be impressive. I think that's when I went full vegan again, with more knowledge. Like, it wasn't as disastrous as when I was a teenager, because I had more money, for one thing, so I could buy slightly less stupid food. But, yeah, I mean, it didn't work at all, even though I was in the gym. And when I had, like, a tally of what I'd eaten that day, it looked like a lot. I was still losing weight, like, all the time, wasting away. But for whatever reason, I somehow managed to convince myself that wasn't the case. Like, it was like one of those horror things they do, where someone looks in the mirror and they see something fantastic, but then the camera pans away from the mirror to the actual person, and you realize they look horrifying, like they're really, you know, emaciated and deathly. And you realize it's like this horrible, their brain has tricked them. And when I see, like, photos of myself from back at parties and stuff, that's all I think. Like, my arms are like the size of a matchstick. But in my head at the time, I looked like John Cena or whatever, like, you know, whoever's big at the moment. But yeah, it's just kind of it honestly made me wonder, like, what the hell was wrong with me at the time. It was almost comical. You know, probably, like, to an outside perspective, it would be laughable. But yeah. Anyway.
How long did you go vegan the second time?
So that went for about 4 months.
And before that, you were basically plant-based.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The plant-based phrase, most people are plant-based now, because plant-based implies majority plants. Most people, even omnivores, 80% of what they eat is plants now. You know, like, they all love their porridge and having their rice and their potatoes. They have, like, a little bit of, you know, ham or whatever in a day. But yeah, this time, I mean, that was the thing. I even had to start going on testosterone boosters when I was vegan the second time, which is when I realized something was wrong. Like, when the doctors were saying, when a doctor tells you have to take that kind of thing, you know it's bad news. But yeah, I mean, those 4 months. And then the final time, and this was the last emphasis on final time, was back in 2019. I had switched my job and was working with fine foods, mostly like cheeses and pastrami and, like, delicatessen type stuff. and no one wore gloves. And I'm not going to say what the place was I worked for because I don't want a lawsuit coming to your channel or whatever. But no one wore gloves. There was no hygiene, and it really like creeped me out. Like, it was disgusting. And for some reason, instead of just thinking, damn, I should get a new job or oh, I should complain, I decided, well, I'll just never eat meat and cheese again. And it was like this. Well, I told myself it was like this spiritual awakening, whatever the hell that means. And so yeah, I cut all that out, and I was doing meditation every day and like these weird Kundalini chants, all this like this hippie stuff people are into now, like New Age vibe. And that was the thing. That was during, I think I first switched to it in winter, and I suddenly was always very cold about a month later, even though I always had huge coats and stuff. And that was the first clue that yet again I'd been dumb enough to make the same mistake again without realizing. Um, but by the new year, so by sort of February time last year, I realized something had to change. Like something was so wrong because I was like 25 and I was so ill. I looked 14 at best, and I couldn't tan. I'm pale at the moment, but that's mostly because I never leave my home because it's like frowned upon now, and it's winter when I do. But in the summer and stuff, never. I'm always pale as anything, beyond the occasional new freckle. I look like a vampire or something. And I was just realizing like this. I have like this weird crisis, I guess, thinking how something's so wrong that I can't place what it is. And I had a girlfriend at the time, and by this point, I mean, I was so shot, like physically and stuff. I think she was considering leaving me because of how gross I'd become. And anyway, so actually, this is where I discovered your channel. It came up when I was watching a thing about vegan recipes. A guy I used to rip off. I used to copy the stuff he put out, and it was total insanity. It was like, everything was fake meat, right? Everything was like, char this watermelon for 45 minutes, and you can tell yourself it's a gammon steak or something. And for some reason I never registered. Who the hell has 45 minutes to do that? That's. But anyway, one of your videos came up as like a reactions video to him. And so I clicked it out of interest because it was saying his diet was toxic, I think was the word. And I was thinking, well, that's ridiculous. He's got like 30 fruits and veg a day. He's super healthy, what the hell? And so I clicked it and watched. And anyway, there's a lot of terms I hadn't heard before. I never knew what an oxalate was, right? Every time I ate beetroot, I thought, damn, I'm really, doing my body a favor here. And in reality, it's like, no, I've killed my renal system. I haven't done it a favor at all. I've ruined it. So I started looking into oxalates and anti-nutrients and all these other fancy science terms. And I very quickly realized what my problem was. Right, it didn't take. Probably took like an hour to think, oh, this is what's gone wrong. And so I went to the store and did some groceries, bought some beef properly, and started eating it by the day. And initially, I was still scared of like parasites, right, and viruses and all that rubbish. And so I was worried that if I didn't cook it well enough, I'd have diarrhea until it killed me or something. So I was still cooking it well done, but gradually that kind of gave way as well. So it was rare, and then it was like steak tartare, like raw basically, and I felt great. And it tasted good. And, when it wasn't cauterized by my frying pan, it went down a lot easier in terms of my digestive system. They always say beef is deadly to digest, like so rough on the guts. You have a lot of like MMA fighters and dancers and stuff who say they have to eat light, and that means they never eat, cow, basically. But when it was raw, I felt fine. I felt, I've always been quite limber. And I didn't feel like bogged down in the day, like, like constipated or whatever. The kind of domesticated humans, like they domesticate dogs and cats and all that. We're like the human equivalent of house pets now. And
How long were you vegan altogether? The 3
I mean,
times?
if I put them all together as one thing, I'd say that's about a year.
And did you try any supplements or any of that stuff?
Oh, loads, yeah. There was so much money wasted on vitamin D, especially.
Mm.
Like they have these little tablets and they say 5 times the daily allowance in one tablet. And you think, well, that sorts me right up for the week then. Doesn't do anything. But yeah, multivitamins, yeah, like I said before, testosterone boosters. And I mean, the worst one, most embarrassing one, is laxatives. I was always freaking constipated, probably from all the fibre. So I was always having to waste money on things that meant when I sat on the toilet, I wasn't in for disappointment. Um, but yeah, I mean, all kinds of stuff. The worst was iron tablets. I was prescribed for being anemic, and this is quite a while ago now. And yeah, they because if you eat loads of animal iron, it digests quite naturally, so your body's quite safe. But when you start eating like supplemental, I guess like fake iron, the amount of havoc it wreaks in your body is just dreadful. Like when I was performing in a play at the time, and basically every time I went off stage, I had to run for a bin. And I never vomited. It was just like the stomach felt so bad and so like knotted up. I was always constantly just assuming I was on the cusp of, chundering everywhere. Yeah, I mean, it was rough. It was like a month. Every month I would have spent like £80 on subs at the worst time when I was at the gym and stuff. But yeah, nowadays I don't really have any supplements, to be honest, beyond like the occasional fish oil tablet or something. So
Did you have any closer friends who were vegan, or just some acquaintances who now say, "Why did you stop?" Or anybody who really minds it that you now don't do it anymore?
yeah, no one really minds I don't do. I mean, I get made fun of, but I think that's more because of like how I eat seems strange to them now, like raw food and stuff.
Hmm.
When I was a bit younger, my best mate, when I was like in my late teens, he went to university, and he was like drinking non-stop, like out of control. I mean, we all were back then. I think it was like the excitement of being away from home. We all got hammered all the time. But he decided, because he didn't have much money, because he's like on a student budget, he would save money by not eating as much food, so he'd have enough for his liquor. And he had one salad a day as his meal, vegan salad. Like no chicken Caesar or carb salad or anything. It was just lettuce and beans, I think peas. And like I don't think he ever recovered. By the time he came back from uni, we didn't really know why. Like, I think this was why now, obviously, but at the time we didn't know why. He was like a vegetable. It was really, like, no pun intended, but it was really awful. He couldn't think straight. He couldn't do anything. He was always exhausted. He was always angry too. Like, he was so pissed off, but never with a reason. Like, he never had like, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me today kind of story. He was just perpetually like upset. Like when I tell people I eat bone marrow, right, which is like one of the best things I've found for my health. I think it's like a love. They don't even realize that people sell it or eat it or it's a thing. They're at that point where eating animals is almost as bad as like eating a person or something. Some kind of like horrifying crime against nature. Yeah, I
Especially
mean,
if it's raw.
especially definitely. But once it's raw, you're like a horror movie monster. Like
Cannibal.
yeah, you're like some kind of like demon. Like
Right.
they look at you like you're from one of those old zombie flicks or something. Scoop their brain out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing. Yeah, it's cooking is simply like cooking meat and stuff, simply destroying it. Like if you set a person on fire, you haven't improved them. You've killed them. And with the meats, when I tried to throw that out there, that like when all the fat seeps out of it into the pan and stuff, you're ruining it. Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of well, not everyone wants a heart attack, and not everyone wants dysentery. Whatever it is nowadays. Yeah, there are these usual diseases people claim about.
Anything else you remember that's worth mentioning? Any experience during the time? A lesson you learned, or something you would maybe want to say to vegans if any are watching?
Yeah, there's something I have noticed, and there's it used to be said in the old days, it's probably not anymore, a causal link between bad eating, especially plant-based eating, and addiction, like liquor, drugs, all that kind of thing. And pretty much every vegan celebrity you hear about, they're always like cocaine addicts or heroin addicts or potheads or whatever. And when I think back, like the guy I was talking about who was drinking non-stop, once you start depriving yourself of things in your life like that you're meant to have, that you need to have, there's a big hole in your mind and body that's left behind afterwards. And if you won't let yourself feel it naturally, once you start getting unhappy and irritable and sick, you will start feeling it unnaturally, like with terrible things. And yeah, that's like a one-way road to self-destruction. You know, and I mean the parting message I'd have is because most of these vegans are often quite liberal and stuff politically, like they'll hate like a lot of big government parties and all that kind of thing. And all I have to ask is, so if you know that's dodgy, how come you don't know that the TV channels and the propaganda paid for by the same people aren't dodgy as well? Like they seem to think the subversion stops when it comes to the kitchen. Like, no, they'd never do that. I say, bloody course they would. It's the first thing they do. You know, that's like the first thing cult leaders do. They put everyone on like crappy sugar diets and stuff because they're weak. And they're easy to control that way when they're hungry and tired and sad and desperate. And, you know, they're looking for the next fix or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, really the parting message would simply be, you know, they always say go vegan for a day, try it and you might like it. Would just be to switch that and say go raw carnivore for a day, try it and you might like it. Because 9 out of 10 people, unless they were really unlucky and bought the shittest meat on earth, are going to think, oh, this is good. You know, as crazy as it looks, it's good. But yeah, I've never been good at short, simple messages, apparently.
No, that's a good one, yeah.
If you're a parent, do not put your child on plant-based stuff as much as possible, because the better fed they are, you know, every kid always has to go to the doctor every week now, I see. You put them on a proper, well-fed, natural diet, they won't have to. The amount of like antibiotics they used to be on, and the amount of rubbish I was eating, it was insane. It borders on almost like a form of child abuse, like inadvertent child abuse, not deliberate. But yeah, that would be the main thing. Feed your kid eggs and beef every day. Doesn't have to be raw for a 4-year-old if you're worried about that. It's still better than nothing. But yeah, because I mean the amount of kids now who like are unenergetic and debilitated and have to wear super thick glasses, it's terrible. They're more like old people than children. So yeah, that would be. I think that's probably the most important message is to parents everywhere: is to feed your kid properly.
Okay, man. Thanks for sharing.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. I hope that wasn't too unintelligible. But anyway, thanks for having me.